Welcome to another deep dive. Today, we're tackling Gnosticism.
Oh, Gnosticism.
Yeah, you've brought us these excerpts from the Tree of Gnosis.
Ah, fascinating.
It seems like you're ready to really get into Western thought, Gnosticism, how these ideas play out through history.
Yeah, it's not just some, dusty old history, though.
Right.
These ideas still matter today, these different ways of seeing the world.
Yeah, it's like we're opening up a time capsule of ideas and seeing how they still kind of rattle around today.
I like that.
So the source material here, it jumps right into this concept of morphodynamics, which sounds very complicated.
Yeah,
But it's basically how systems of thought change over time.
exactly. And it's more dynamic than just like dates and names.
Right.
It's like imagine a set of building blocks.
Yeah.
Each block is like a core idea, light, darkness, creation, salvation.
Mhm.
And Gnostic mythology, it's not about finding like a one right way to arrange them, you see?
Yeah.
It's about how all these blocks can recombine to build all these different structures of belief.
It's like those intricate domino setups where
yeah.
you nudge one thing over here and it has this ripple effect.
It's like that.
So let's start with one of those big dominoes, shall we?
Yeah.
Dualism.
Okay.
Most people, when they hear that word, they think good versus evil.
Right, right.
But in this text, it seems like it's something way deeper than that.
Absolutely. It's not just that, good and evil are out there in the world.
Right.
It's about a fundamental, split in reality itself.
Oh, wow.
It's like those are two fundamental forces,
Yeah.
often opposed. And this really contrasts with something like, what you find in Judaism or early Christianity, where you have this one single divine creator.
Yeah, it's interesting they bring up that thought experiment, about Flatland.
Yeah.
If you only know two dimensions, like a 3D object, you can't even picture it.
Right.
And dualism is kind of offering that kind of perspective shift.
Yeah. A whole different way of framing what even existence is.
Wow.
And Gnosticism, they dared to offer this very different view, even if it challenged everything else at the time.
And they did that in part through their myths, these stories, these ideas.
Right.
But this text is pushing us to not just look for like one original source for these stories.
Yeah, it's not about trying to find like a first draft.
Right.
It's about approaching these myths as part of this dynamic system that we're talking about.
Right.
These key figures, these themes, they're constantly being reinterpreted. The building blocks are getting rearranged.
So it's constantly evolving.
Yes, exactly.
So give us an example. How does this actually work with one of these figures?
Okay, well, let's take Sophia, often depicted as divine wisdom.
Okay.
In some Gnostic texts, she's flawed.
Okay.
She makes this cosmic blunder, leads to the creation of the material world.
Oh, so it's her fault.
Well, in some versions, but in others, she represents pure divinity.
Okay.
She's a source of spiritual guidance.
Wow. So the same figure can be flawed or divine.
Exactly, depending on how the blocks are arranged in that particular
It's
text.
like a prism reflecting light in all these different ways.
Exactly. And we see this with the Demiurge as well.
What was that?
Often seen as the creator of the material world, often portrayed as ignorant, foolish, but not always malicious.
Oh, interesting.
Sometimes he's a tragic figure,
Okay.
completely unaware of the true divine realm beyond his own creation.
So it's not so simple, you're saying?
No, not at all. And it reminds us that Gnosticism, it wasn't just one thing.
Right.
It was a whole tapestry of different groups, each weaving their own patterns, from these core threads.
Okay, so we've got these threads, these patterns,
Yes.
and we start to see them pop up in really intriguing ways as we move through history.
Exactly.
Take Martianism, for example, a movement that emerges in the 2nd century.
Yes, Mardian.
This guy from the source material, he sounds like a total revolutionary.
He was definitely a controversial figure.
Rejecting the entire Old Testament? I mean, wow.
Can you imagine, 2nd century, and you're saying the Old Testament God, that's it, completely separate from the God of Jesus.
That's a bold move.
It wasn't just theology for him. It was about reassessing the foundation of faith.
Wow, he was like an ancient minimalist,
I like that.
just stripping everything down to the essentials.
Streamlining.
What was the impact of that? I mean, that's a huge statement to make.
Oh, he sent shockwaves through the early Christian community.
Really?
Oh, yeah. It forced them to figure out where they stand on the Old Testament versus the New Testament.
It's like he forced the issue just by taking this stance.
Exactly. And in a way, it helped shape the Christian canon as we know it today.
Wow, talk about a butterfly effect, right? One person's interpretation having this ripple effect across centuries.
That's morphodynamics in action.
So Martianism is reinterpreting scripture, those building blocks. What about Manichaeism? They seem to take this idea of light versus darkness to a whole other level.
Absolutely. Founded by Mani in the 3rd century,
Okay.
they envisioned this cosmic battle between light and darkness playing out on a huge scale.
Hmm.
But here's where it gets interesting.
Okay.
It wasn't just some abstract theological concept for them.
Right.
It had real implications for their everyday life,
Like what?
like what they ate, for example.
Really? Like a divine diet plan?
You could say that.
What did they eat?
Well, they believed certain foods, they could aid in spiritual liberation.
Okay.
It was like ingesting light that was trapped within the material world.
So no steak dinners for these guys.
Not exactly. Imagine a diet designed to free the divine spark within a melon.
A melon, wow.
It's an example of how a belief system, it can permeate even the most everyday parts of life.
Wow, that's wild. Okay, speaking of unique interpretations, the source material then goes on to introduce Bogomilism.
Ah, the Bogomils.
Yeah, emerging in Bulgaria with a very unusual take on, get this, the devil's role in creation.
They had a fascinating twist on the Genesis story.
Okay.
They attributed the creation of the material world to Satan.
Oh, wow. Okay, so they're going there.
But, and this is important, they didn't see it as separate from God's will.
Okay, so not like a purely dualistic view where God and Satan are locked in eternal combat.
Exactly. They maintained God's ultimate authority.
Okay.
Satan was more like, shall we say, a cosmic subcontractor.
Cosmic subcontractor, I love that.
Allowed to build this world to God's design, but ultimately answerable to a higher power.
So he's still calling the shots, he's just not doing the building himself.
Precisely.
I like that, a cosmic subcontractor.
It really makes you think about how we even define dualism.
Okay.
Are they dualist because they see Satan as the builder? Or does their view of God's power make it more nuanced?
Right. It's more complicated than just good versus evil, two sides of the coin.
Exactly. We need to move past those simple binaries.
And that leads us to the Cathars, this movement that flourished in medieval Europe.
Yeah, Cathars, yes.
And even they, the source material suggests, they couldn't agree on this whole dualism thing.
There were definitely disagreements within their ranks.
What were they disagreeing about?
Well, some of them, the absolute dualists, believed in these two eternal principles.
Okay.
God and Satan. Totally equal, completely opposed.
Okay.
Others, though, they were called mitigated dualists. And they leaned more towards that Bogomil view.
Right. So Satan is powerful, but ultimately he answers to someone.
Exactly. Subordinate to God.
So even within one movement, you have a spectrum of interpretation on these big ideas.
And that highlights this key point from the source material. Systems of thought. They're not static. They're dynamic.
They're always in motion.
Exactly. Constantly adapting across time and groups.
So there's never just one answer,
Rarely.
which I kind of like.
Me too.
Keeps things interesting.
It's like trying to map a constantly changing landscape, wouldn't you say?
Yeah. And speaking of changing landscapes, get ready for a big jump because this source material, it connects all of this to modern nihilism.
From ancient Gnosticism to modern nihilism, it's quite a leap.
Right on the surface, they seem worlds apart.
Worlds of...
But the text suggests there's a connection there.
Well, what's interesting is both Gnosticism and nihilism, even though they're separated by centuries,
Right.
they represent this rebellion against the accepted truths of their time.
Now that you mention it, I can see a thread there. But before we get into that, let's take a quick break.
All right.
We'll be back soon to delve deeper into this intriguing connection. We're back and ready to dive into this unexpected link between ancient Gnosticism and modern nihilism.
Quite a pair, right.
It's like we're drawing a line between these two distant points, and suddenly we see a pattern emerge.
Exactly. And at their core,
Yeah.
both Gnostics and nihilists, they reject the conventional values of their time.
Okay.
So Gnostics, they saw this material world as flawed, a creation to be escaped.
Right. They're always yearning for that true spiritual reality.
And that's key, right?
Okay.
Because they were, in essence,
Yeah.
nihilistic towards the world they knew.
So it was meaningless to them?
In the grand scheme of their belief system, yeah.
Okay. And they were looking for something else, something more.
They sought transcendence.
Right.
They saw this world as something to be left behind.
Okay.
And modern nihilism, they may not share that belief in a higher realm,
Right.
but they also reject these traditional systems of meaning and purpose.
So both groups are kind of asking, if this is all there is, then what's the point?
That's the question, isn't it?
Yeah, but one is searching for meaning elsewhere,
Right.
while the other is questioning if meaning even exists at all.
Two sides of the same coin, perhaps.
Like maybe. And the source material. It points out some interesting parallels between Gnostic thought and the works of, get this, romantic writers.
Ah, the Romantics.
Like Percy Shelley, Lord Byron, those guys.
Fascinating connections there.
Because Romanticism, now that you mention it,
Yeah.
with its emphasis on individual experience,
Right.
that longing for the transcendent, it does kind of have that Gnostic flavor to it.
Take Shelley's Prometheus Unbound, for example.
Okay.
Prometheus, defying the gods.
Okay.
He becomes this symbol of the human spirit striving for liberation from these oppressive forces.
Which is kind of like that Gnostic yearning to break free from the material world.
Exactly. He embodies that Gnostic seeker. But instead of a hidden god,
Yeah.
he's seeking knowledge and freedom for all humanity.
Okay, so we're seeing these Gnostic themes, but played out in a different context.
Precisely. And then you have Byron's Cain. Yeah. A mystery.
Right.
Where Cain, he's cursed with knowledge.
Right.
He encounters Lucifer.
Okay.
And Lucifer reveals this power even higher than the traditional God of the Old Testament.
Wow. Okay, so they're kind of rewriting the rules of the game a little bit.
Reimagining the fall through this lens of hidden knowledge.
Oh, wow.
Rebellion against a creator who might be flawed.
So these ancient Gnostic ideas, they're not just being copied, they're being filtered through this new lens of Romanticism.
Exactly. They take on these new meanings, new complexities.
So they're still the same building blocks.
Yeah.
But they're being rearranged, built upon.
And that process, that's key to understanding how we get to modern nihilism.
So how does Romanticism, with its yearning for the infinite, lead to nihilism?
Well, imagine that romantic longing, that search for the sublime, but now juxtapose that with
Yeah.
the increasing mechanization, the disillusionment of the late 19th, 20th centuries.
So that yearning, when it bumps up against the real world,
It can morph into disillusionment, questioning if there's even meaning at all.
like staring into the abyss and finding it empty.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And when that romantic search fails to find a satisfying answer,
Yeah.
nihilism might be waiting right there.
Wow. So it's not a direct line from A to B,
Right.
but it's like the seeds were there.
The source material suggests that those seeds, they were present, waiting for the right conditions to bloom.
That's a really interesting way to look at it. So we've gone from ancient Gnosticism to medieval reinterpretations, all the way to Romanticism and its potential link to modern nihilism. That's quite a journey.
And it highlights this idea from the source material, this idea of systems of thought as a board game.
Oh, yeah. I was hoping we'd get back to that.
So if we're saying that Gnosticism, Christianity, Romanticism, even nihilism, they're all part of the same game.
Okay.
What are the rules?
That's the big question, isn't it? What are the rules that we're all playing by?
What are the underlying assumptions, the things we don't even question that shapes how we see the world, the moves we think are possible?
That's kind of a scary thought, isn't it? That our understanding of reality might be shaped by forces we're not even aware of.
Perhaps, but also empowering, don't you think?
How so?
Because once we're aware of the game, we can start to question the rules.
Oh, I see.
We can strategize our moves, maybe even find new ways to play altogether.
Okay, I like that. So it's not about being stuck in one way of thinking.
Not at all. It's about recognizing the possibilities.
That's a great point, and I think a good place to pause for now.
Indeed.
Picking up where we left off, it's pretty amazing to think about.
Yeah.
These ideas, these movements, they weren't just happening in some vacuum.
Right. Not just theories in a book.
Right. We're talking about real people living their lives shaped by these beliefs.
Exactly. Think about it.
Yeah.
Marcion, breaking away from the Old Testament, that was a radical move.
Huge.
And the Manichaeans, their approach to food, like it was almost sacred.
Oh, yeah. Totally different way of looking at things.
The Bogomils reinterpreting the devil's role. I mean, come on, that's bold.
These weren't just like intellectual debates, right?
No way.
This was their reality.
It's easy to forget that.
Yeah. And all these systems, they're bumping into each other, overlapping, evolving.
Always in motion.
Even Orthodox Christianity, it was shaped by these interactions, by pushing back against these other movements.
It's like that saying, iron sharpens iron.
Right. Like you define yourself by what you're not.
Exactly. And it helps you clarify your own position.
But it wasn't just a one-way street either.
True.
Like you were saying before, these dualistic movements, they often drew on older traditions, reinterpreted them.
Exactly. They had to start somewhere.
Like the Bogomils using the Bible, but flipping the script on creation.
They were playing the same game, just with a different set of rules.
Right, like those building blocks, rearranged.
Exactly. Radical ideas, but often with roots in something older.
It makes you wonder, what ideas today are being shaped by this kind of back and forth?
Oh, constantly. It's
Yeah.
still happening.
Oh, right. Like we see echoes of this Gnostic thought everywhere in art, literature, even modern philosophy.
It's like these ancient ways of thinking, they're still whispering to us across the centuries,
I love that image, whispering across the centuries.
offering different perspectives, challenging our assumptions.
And that's really what this deep dive is all about, isn't it?
What do you think?
Realizing there are many ways to see the world, each with its own value.
It's about cultivating that curiosity, that openness to new ideas.
Even if they seem strange at first, right?
Especially then, that's where the real growth happens, when we step outside our comfort zones.
Well said. I think we've all gained a much deeper appreciation for this idea of Western dualism today.
It's been quite a journey.
It really has, and a huge thank you to the source material for guiding us.
The Tree of Gnosis, everyone.
Yeah, check it out if you want to dive deeper into these ideas.
Because this is really just the beginning. The conversation never ends.
So true. And on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive.
Until next time.
Keep exploring, keep questioning, and we'll see you on the next one.